Hello, my name is Umi Garrett. I am a From the Top alum as well as a Jack Kent Cooke Young Artist. I am currently studying piano at Juilliard. I am going to be a rising fourth year. Right now I'm at the Aspen Music Festival for 2 months, so I apologize for not having a piano with me at the moment while I go through this wonderful piece with you. But I'm very excited nonetheless to be showing you a recording performance of William Grant Still's Three Visions, as well as talking a little bit about Grant Still and this piece. So yeah, I have just a few things. First about William Grant Still, where he's from, and all of this great stuff about his background, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the piece. So, William Grant Still, incredible composer. He's an American composer. He was born in 1895. And he was sort of a musical prodigy. He began violin at a very young age, and he just continued to do music throughout his life. He went to college for composition and orchestration, and pretty much right out of graduating, he was already professionally orchestrating, composing, and conducting all around the country. So he was very gifted from a very young age, and people could tell that immediately, and he had a very successful career throughout his life. He was the first African-American person to conduct a major symphony orchestra in the LA Phil, actually. And he received many honorary degrees from different prestigious universities. His work, much of it focuses on the lives and experiences of African American people in the United States, especially, and the violence and oppression that they face. Although he is most well known for his ballets, operas, and symphonies, really big, large-scale works, the Three Visions for the keyboard was actually very popular during his lifetime. It continues to be explored today, and it's one of the more famous shorter pieces and shorter sets that he wrote. So this piece was written in 1935. It was premiered by his wife in 1936, which I think is really beautiful. It's a set of 3 pieces, and it goes through the journey of what happens to a soul after death. So when you look at, for example, the titles of these 3 pieces, Dark Horseman, which is the first one, describing death and just the violence of that. The second is Summerland, and the third one is Radiant Pinnacle. So you can tell just through the titles of the pieces sort of what each piece has to offer to this big storyline journey that you're taking an audience through. So yeah, I think I will just start by talking a little bit about the first piece and then going on to the second and then third. And I have the score in front of me. I really wish I had a piano, otherwise I would play along while talking, but if you have a score with you, just please, feel free to just follow along. And yeah, just a few things that I focused a lot on when I was learning Dark Horseman is a lot of the articulation and the imagery. One of the most confusing things when I was first reading it was the triplets that goes, it has a crescendo just within the triplet, and it's very quick, and I wasn't sure how to play it. But the title says it all. It's a Dark Horseman. So it really is supposed to sound like a horse that's galloping. And to get that sort of imagery, it's really important to keep in mind the volume, just getting that crescendo in, as well as the kick at the very end of the crescendo. So that's something that I focused on a lot during learning this piece. I would say out of the 3, this one's the most technically challenging. None of them are really hugely technically challenging. They're not technical pieces, but there are moments that are difficult and take a bit of practice. For example, there's some leaps in the Dark Horseman, and there are one of the most challenging things for me was getting these single notes to be really, really loud. So, for example, he has in the B section almost, in the left hand, you have single notes, and they have carets on them, little accents, and they're also in fortissimo. So playing really loud and really accented on a piano is a lot easier when you have a lot of notes, because it gets all of these like vibrations and it creates a huge impact. But doing that with a single note can be hard. One thing that I did do for some of the notes is to play it with two fingers like this, just to get that extra attack in. This piece is really meant to be scary. It's a fearful piece. It's a lot of shock, a lot of violence, and in order to be able to represent these kinds of emotions and these kinds of feelings, you have to use a lot of force and a lot of speed in your attack of the keys. So that's sort of mainly what I focused on, as well as contrasts with dynamics. There's definitely a lot of forte to immediately down to mezzo piano, back to fortissimo, and that kind of stuff. Accentuating that will really help get across the feeling of fear and shock, and that's really what this first one is about. It's setting up the next two for sure, as the next two are more about transcendence and about peace after death. But this first one really go all out, and I believe there is a part so a lot of the writings in here just says with great force. So I think that really just sums it all up. With great force, think about the imagery of the horses, and that should really, I hope that helps a little bit. That's what I was thinking about when I was learning this piece. And then moving on to Summerland. So this piece is about the peace, the peace that you find after death. It's about just this moment of a little joy, maybe a little sentimentality. It depicts heaven in a certain way, or the afterlife, whatever he may have believed in. So this is sort of the moment after the soul rises away from like the physical being. And this, in Summerland, I think is one of the most improvisatory pieces that I have ever played. It really gives a lot of room for freedom, a lot of room for your own interpretation. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about this piece, is that it really changes depending on who plays it, and there's no right or wrong. I mean, Grant Still himself writes, writs and writes to play it in like a flowing way. It's supposed to be very tranquil, and he has little notes here and there, saying things like to play the beginning very smoothly and to play some parts gracefully and evenly. So those things I would definitely look out for and follow that. But outside of that, it's a very, very free piece. You can tell by the phrasing, by how many ritardandos he writes in, and just by the very lyrical thing of the piece. It's very, very, it evokes the voice a lot, and you can really hear how it could really just be a song. Someone could write lyrics to it and it could be a song. So in order to get that sort of effect of it being sung, it's really important to try not to play very metronomically, which seems kind of counterintuitive when learning a piece, but it's very free. So I think, especially if you take a look at the portion past the double bar line, you have to always focus on where the melody is. So that's what I tried to do. Here the left hand takes over after the double bar line, and you have to sing your left hand as freely as possible. However, he does comment that the right hand should be very even. I took that as more a volume and texture thing more than timing. But I think it could go either way. I just was trying to focus more on singing the left hand and fitting in the right hand where it could go. And there's moments where the music kind of just moves itself. For example, if you keep going after that section, there are parts where there's lots of upbeats that begin the next phrase, and that for me signifies kind of moving towards the downbeat, moving in a more breathless manner as well. If there's multiple, like da 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 da, you're moving forward a little breathless, and then you go back to a very relaxed state. So there's a lot of ebb and flow in this piece, and I think that it can be easy to get caught up in like the tempo and the rhythm and making sure you have it right. And of course that's important, but after that, I believe this piece really comes to life when you put your own twist on it and you really take your time and just think about the imagery that Grant Still is trying to evoke through this piece. It's heaven, and it's this sort of contentment and this peace, and just you feel very at rest. So there's nothing, it's the complete opposite of the first piece. There is nothing that is scary or a shock. Nothing should be sticking out. There are, beautiful, beautiful moments where the color changes, where the harmony changes. But that shouldn't feel surprising, but to me it should feel more like a sigh of relief, if that makes any sense. So yeah, this is one of my favorite pieces of all time. And I would also, just speaking of harmony, I would also try to focus on that a lot as well. There's a lot of jazzy harmonies. There's a lot of harmonies that you wouldn't usually get to play in classical music. And so I really enjoy this piece. There's lots of sevenths and ninths. And you have to really, I think, milk those moments where there's lots of chromaticism, and there's these really pleasant moments of tension releasing through different chord changes and harmony changes and color changes. So I would just pay attention to those moments, find the moments that you think are special, and just kind of work towards that and have the music go towards those special moments. And yeah, it's a really beautiful piece. It kind of plays itself in a way. Yeah, I think that's really, I don't have much else to say about Summerland. Yeah, and so let's move on to Radiant Pinnacle. I think by far this is the most complicated piece out of the three, which makes sense, as this the last piece is meant to signify the transcendence of the soul. It's supposed to really be depicting how your soul ascends to join and to become a more perfect kind of being. It's very spiritual in that way, and I think the music and its complexities and its sort of confusing moments, it really shows that like sort of vagueness, and you don't really know where the ascension is to, but you know that the soul is sort of finding its own place. And so in this piece there is also imagery that we talked about before, and I think that big part of it is at the very, very end. So you're gonna see 4 of the same chords, I guess 5 if you don't count that it's in a different register, but it really rings, and to me it sounds like church bells. It might sound like something else to you, but that's sort of what I thought about when I was playing it. And near the end, already from where it says slower, there's these bells. For me it sounds like high bells, signifying something, maybe that the piece is coming to a close. And there's these chords that go from high to low, and that just sounds like different kinds of bells to me. So I used a lot of pedal, and I tried to get it to ring as much as possible, and I took a lot of time to let like the reverb do its thing. So that's definitely something that I was thinking about. And in other parts of the piece, like I said, it is the more complex and confusing than the other two. So I was really trying to figure out what to bring out, where the direction is within this piece, what is it trying to say. And I believe a lot of this, a lot of the answers that I found to those questions were in the harmony and in like the sound roll that you create. So already off the bat, if you go in maybe 4 or 5 measures in, there's a beautiful phrase where the left hand has a lot of chords, and each of them are completely different sonorities, completely different harmonies. And that's something that I tried to really listen to every time it came around. It comes back a few times with different notes, different dynamics, things like that. But I really tried to sit on each chord and listen to how it sounded in the moment as much as possible. And if we go on, this piece is also improvisatory in a way as well, I think a little less than Summerland, but there's definitely room for you to move and to pull back wherever you find that to be appropriate. For example, so maybe this is 8 or 10 measures into the piece, but there are a bunch of hairpins going from piano to mezzo forte, and these are kind of segmented phrases, and I wasn't sure how to approach them. But I tried to look at it as one big direction. It's going from the first one all the way to the last one, and in this I found some room to push a little bit, and then sort of relax at the next iterations of this sort of the shape that he creates with the notes. And I think the shapes are also important. He has a lot of these do-do-do-do-do kind of shapes, and I think that's sort of one of the motifs that keep coming back in this piece. So whenever that comes around, like maybe you don't have to do anything really fancy to it, but that might be something to look out for, something to pay attention to, that might be interesting in your studies later on. Another theme that I found throughout this piece is the fourths that he uses. So he uses a lot of the fourth interval. For example, just already off the bat, the melody goes do-do-do-do-do, and already the do-do, that's a fourth. And then he uses the fourth interval right after that. And it creates this sort of unsettledness for me. It just sounds too parallel to where you kind of get this really uneasy feeling, but then it's resolved immediately afterwards. So I would pay attention to the fourths coming back as well. It happens a lot. And whenever it happens, because a lot of the melody itself is very close to each other, it's very like thirds and seconds, so whenever the fourths do happen, I try to treat them as leaps, even though they're not that far. I just try to imagine singing them and how it would, how much effort it would take for my voice to go up a fourth. So that's sort of what I tried to think about. And I guess another motif would be the 3-note motif. So if you go a little further into the piece, there's another double bar line in this piece, and there's a do-do-do-do-do-do sort of theme. And this, for me, I had the most trouble sort of deciphering. I wasn't sure where it was coming from. But instead of coming from somewhere, this actually is leading towards measure 49, which is after it moves back to 4 sharps. And this melody goes do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So this 3-note block has been building for almost 2 pages just to get to this like realization where he writes smoothly and sustained, and he really brings it up at the very end of this to fortissimo. So this is sort of like the climactic moment for me. It just keeps building and building, and there's this beautiful, it was so detached before and now it's sustained. And I think that's a really wonderful transition to focus on. And then it keeps going higher and higher and louder and louder. He writes much slower and as loudly as possible in one part, and then right after he says faster. So this is really just chaotic, big sounds and big moments. You really want to treat this as the peak of the piece. So that's really what I did, and then it goes back down and kind of repeats the beginning again, but with slightly different harmonies. So when these different colors come in, I tried to also think about that and think about how each harmony feels a little bit different. Some might feel like there's more tension, others might feel like there's more peace or more seriousness, maybe more loneliness or more joy in others. So I would just try to decipher it in terms of harmony. That's what I did, and you should be all good. I hope some of this commentary helped. That's just kind of what I was thinking about while going through the piece. And, I think the most important thing about playing this set is just to understand the backstory about what Grant Still hoped to achieve through the piece. He was telling the story of a soul that dies and then goes, in a sense, to heaven and ascends to almost a state of perfection. And one thing that I read in a program note, which was written by his daughter, Judith Ann Still, I recommend you read this as well, before or during your exploration of this piece. He was hoping to show how the afterlife is the same for everyone, no matter their race. And for him, this piece was supposed to be sort of a grim reminder that everyone's going to be judged no matter what. But I assume that it was also, in a way, sort of a ray of hope, and that's sort of how I see it as well. I see it as a grim reminder, but also as a little light of hope, because everyone has a chance to ascend to heaven. Every soul has the ability to do so, and I think that's what this piece really is exploring, is that no matter who you are, you explore the same path after death. Where that may take you, I don't know, but that's what Grant Still, I think, hoped to show through this set of pieces. So it's a very deep piece. It has very deep meanings. It's very spiritual as well. And it can seem like a lot to tackle. It sure did for me. But the music is written so well, so pianistically as well, that really the joy is just in every step of the learning process. And I really recommend that you learn this piece if you are not already, and really explore all the backstories of the piece. Read the program notes written about it. That's what I found most helpful when learning the piece, was just knowing the reasoning behind what Grant Still composed and why he wrote in these certain ways, and why these pieces have the emotions that they do. And yeah, I've had just the most wonderful and meaningful experience learning this piece. It's been a joy to explore all of these textures and harmonies, and to just play the three pieces as a set is completely magical. Although they work well individually, it was really just a wonderful experience to get to record all three of these pieces. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy your exploration and your journey with this piece as well. And thank you so much for watching this commentary video, as well as for watching the performance video. I hope you have a wonderful day and stay safe, And yeah, thank you very much.